Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Octane Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And no, Shane, it is not time to panic, but it's time to be honest. And that's where we're going to be in the show. Because Arizona won their opener, 61-39, but it wasn't as we had hoped. How about that?
Yeah, you told me they were going to score 61 points, which they covered the over on their own, and then but then us coming up with a ton of concern. You know, you might think, oh, well, there must have been an injury or something. No, just the defense at times was that bad, which I know we'll get into. Our guest, who I'm sure you'll introduce here shortly, is going to be one to help us. Any fans who are panicking or concerned, or just are like us, like we're genuinely worried about what this defense is going to look like. He'll help us out a little bit because he's always a lot more positive, certainly more than I am. But yeah, a lot to talk about. We got and I'll just mention before we get started, we got a scoregami for that game. It was the first ever college football game that ended in a 61-39 score, exactly 100 points. That the botched PAT sealed it. Yeah, so that's exciting, but certainly some exciting things to talk about, some not so exciting things to talk about, and I'm excited to get to it.
So we saw a few pieces of history at Arizona Stadium on Saturday night. T-Mac, that was what was that stat? The first player to ever have 10 catches, over 30 yards of reception, over 300 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the history of college football, something like that. First player to have a stat line similar to that.
Yep, and it came inches away from a 5th one. So yeah, we'll get into that as well. But yeah, I think that a lot of our questions going into the season have been left unanswered. But I think for the meantime, we can appreciate the fact that Tedero McMillan decided to decommit from Oregon, and that Mario Cristobal decided to go to Miami because that led to the decommitment.
Thank you for that, Mario. Thank you for that, T-Mac. All right, our guest coming up in the second segment and third segment to make picks with us is Jeff Dean, the voice of the Arizona Wildcats at Arizona Stadium and McKale Center. He is always he's always one for positivity. So he'll put a good light on things, and we'll talk to him coming up. But first, Shane and I have to break down everything that happened. Now, first of all, before we get into buy or sell, just an experience, what it was like at Arizona Stadium on Saturday night. About 45,000 people there. It was not necessarily full at the top of the west side of the stadium, but still it was a good crowd. The student section was very good. The DJ was a lot quieter, so I was happy about that. It just kind of, I don't know. It was a good environment, but it wasn't overcharged. It was kind of like, yeah, we know we're good. Kind of an air of confidence, but it didn't have the feel of what Oregon State and UCLA and the Utah games felt like last year when Arizona was on a winning streak. And maybe it's week one apathy, maybe it was the opponent, but that's kind of how I perceived it.
Yeah, and I was actually on a New Mexico podcast Saturday morning. They're asking me, one of the guys asked me, said it may be funny to ask this considering it's New Mexico, but was this the most anticipated game for Arizona in a long time, considering the winning streak that they were on from last year? And I said, it might be the most anticipated season opener in a while, just because the expectations are higher, but I also think there's a bit of trepidation because there is a new coaching staff. And so I feel like the momentum that we otherwise would have had maybe feels a bit muted for that reason. So I think that's part of it. And I think there are also people who've just decided this today, especially with the options to watch from your comfort of your home in high definition, that they're just not, especially that late, they're just not going to go to a game that early in the season, that late, especially those who have to travel from Phoenix like you do. I know you're one of the loyal people who does every single time, but there just aren't a lot of them. So maybe that's just the new reality of the situation out here in Arizona, where we are, despite the success of the football team recently, we are still a basketball first school. But I do think the fact, look, a few years ago for a season opener, we would have had against New Mexico, there might've been 30,000. So yeah, progress. And I do think if Arizona keeps winning and has a pretty good record this year, then you will see a couple sellouts, probably Colorado, because that's obviously a big game now.
Homecoming, yeah.
Homecoming. The ASU game you would certainly hope would be a sellout. Maybe one more in there as long as they play well. But I think, to reset expectations a bit, 45,000 for season opener against a non-power school, I think it's good. Not great, but good.
I think we need to see Arizona win one of the 2 road games against Kansas State and or Utah, especially the Utah game. I don't think really matters what happens against Kansas State for fans, but I think if they go and beat Utah, the game against Texas Tech on October 5th would be one of those that I would put in the sellout area. Arizona has three home games.
I remember just real quick, Eric. I remember when they started the season. I think it was 5-0 and one at Oregon. I went to the next game, and you're sure you were there too, at home against USC. It was electric, absolutely electric.
Yep.
The from the pregame video that they put up, showing the highlights from the previous game. Arizona's obviously, it was all of a sudden in the top 25, and it was. So I think you can get that kind of feel again, but you have to win some games to get there first.
Yeah, but the other thing is, though, Shane, you don't have those opponents on the schedule outside of Colorado right now.
Yeah,
that really are going to bring. I mean, you look at Arizona's home schedule and you're like, all right, you got NAU this week. Then, in a month, you have Texas Tech. Yay, Colorado homecoming. That'll be big one way or the other. You got Dion coming to town. Great. West Virginia, didn't show a lot against Penn State last week.
we're strong about that one.
Yeah. So they're not going to bring a ton there. And then you got Houston on a Friday night at 8:15. So that's not going to bring anything. Then you got ASU. I don't think this is the year where you're going to see that electricity unless Arizona is darn close to undefeated. And I'm just saying that. All right. Let us break it down. It is Buy or Sell presented by our friends at iShaker. Go to iShaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off. And once you do that, make sure to fill out the post-purchase survey. And please mention Wildcat Country. We will eventually bring back Shane's standouts. Well, you want to start us off with just anybody you want, anything you want to say.
Who do you?
Let's
see.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, because since we're going to talk about T-Mac later, let's mention Tyler Loop and how absolutely clutch he's been. They don't drill in a 54-yard field goal. I thought that was actually the worst decision they could have made at that point between pooch punting or going for it. I was like, what are you bringing him out for? But he was great. There are a couple of decent players on defense, which we'll get to. The running backs are great. So no, we'll get to it more. And one thing I like about Shane's standouts is that we get to talk about more than just football and talk about some of the other standouts at other teams, like volleyball and soccer. It's going on right now. Both those teams are off to pretty good starts. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that next week.
We'll bring it back. Shane Standout's coming back next week. I just want to point something out. I have a friend who is a former collegiate punter at another school, and he, had tryouts in the NFL. And he texted me during the game on Saturday, and he said, quote, "I know nothing about the kid, but your kicker is going to have NFL special teams coaches salivating. The lift he gets is elite." So I
nice.
thought you'd
high praise.
Yeah, that was definite high praise. All right, Shane. Number one, let's get right to it. Stop panicking. Arizona's defense will be just fine.
I'm not one to panic right away. You know that, Eric. But I'm going to sell the idea that the defense will be, or just the assumption that the defense is going to be fine after that performance. I think, again, all the questions we had about this team going into the offseason, none of those questions were satisfactorily answered on Saturday. And that includes what the defense was going to look like up front with so much turnover in the offseason. I will start by saying, some people are going to roll their eyes at this, but I do think Devin Dampier is pretty good. And he's a guy who could get some looks from power conference teams if he decides to test the transfer portal waters next season. I think we'll see. I think he is legitimately good. But you look at the numbers, no sacks, 3 tackles for loss. Montana State had twice that many. And two and a half of those 3 tackles for loss were by Jacob Manu. 2 takeaways. One of them was kind of fluky. Now, the defense was a bit better in the second half. One series in particular, they held New Mexico, I believe, to a 3-and-out in the third quarter, forced a punt. Punt was muffed. New Mexico recovered, and Arizona held them to another 3-and-out. So that was good to see. But I think it's to be determined whether the deficiencies on defense, especially up front, are correctable or simply a matter of lack of talent. Because if it's the latter, then Arizona's in trouble. But I can't get away from the fact, and someone pointed this out on X, is that Arizona didn't allow this many points in regulation to anyone last season. And to see them allow that many to a not just a group of 5 team, but a not very good one is definitely not a good sign as far as starting the season.
Where have you gone, Johnny Nansen? I mean, seriously, that's what I was thinking.
He took the turnover sword with him. Did you see that?
Oh, he did? Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
no.
in Texas. Yep, sure did.
Oh, interesting. For all that we bashed Nansen the other year, I was thinking, I miss that guy, and I miss Bill Norton, and I miss Ephesians Price. Corners weren't I mean, the New Mexico made some great plays. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm concerned. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I am concerned. So I'm going to sell this one. I can't tell you that Arizona's defense is going to be fine.
No.
Can't. There are problems. They were undisciplined. They were out of position. Dampier, I mean, mobile quarterbacks are going to feast. Now, Cam Rising, Arizona might have a chance if they can get past Utah's mammoth offensive line. But yeah, I'm concerned because Avery Johnson next week when they play NAU or Kansas State, yeah, it's a problem. He might run all over Arizona and rush for 200 yards. It's a problem. And yeah, I'm gonna panic. I thought about it. I wasn't sure how I wanted to come out on the show and be as open about it, but yeah, Shane, I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, you don't want to overreact to one game, but I think it's reasonable to say, look, we got to clean this up because it just gets after NAU, it gets tough, and this may be, a lot of Big 12 football teams win this way, so Arizona kind of fits right in. But the fact that this is the worst the defense has looked since beginning of last season or before then definitely gives you a cause for concern.
Shane, they stunk. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts. They were awful. And Dwayne Aquina, anything short of holding NAU to one score this week, should still be concerned. I don't know much about NAU. I don't think they're very good. They're not a high level FCS team. If they score more than 10 points, yeah, you should be concerned. We'll make our picks later in the show. That team, Arizona facing them last year, I don't remember the score offhand, but it wasn't this bad. It was 38-3 last year. I'm sorry.
Last year, it was the offense that got off to a rough start that we were concerned about.
Yeah.
That was, of course, when Jaden DeLore was still the quarterback. It wasn't the defense. Defense looked good. This year so far, it's the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, there are problems. Dwayne Aquina needs to do something. Shane, do you think it was a talent or a discipline problem?
Well, I could see the easy answer and say both. Certainly the penalties are, especially the post whistle penalties just are unacceptable, and I think that's maybe a symptom of Keenan maybe having a little too fired up. It's not his fault, but I think they know they have to clean that up, and I think they will. But I just think it remains to be seen. I just don't know if it's a talent thing or if Keenan has a chance to shuffle the lineup, if he will. If everything's correctable, but certainly going up against a team like New Mexico, which Montana State held to 17 offensive points, there's no way not to be concerned.
Now, I mean, there's a big difference. Brent Brennan came out today. We're recording this on Monday, and he said, there's a big difference from week 1 to week 2, and we saw that from New Mexico that they definitely improved on offense and made some adjustments and made Arizona's defense look foolish. Arizona gave up 3 to NAU last year. Anything more than 7, I'll even say 10. Should be worried. All right, Shane, give me a letter grade, in your opinion, for these units from Saturday night. Start with the offensive line, letter grade.
Yeah, I know Michael Leff at the Daily Star gave them a B, and I think that sounds about right. They had yet another injury at left tackle with Rhino, whose last name I still haven't mastered.
Papatue, something like that?
Yeah, he got hurt. They moved Jonas Savanier over to that position afterwards, and now they got a true freshman at right tackle. So that's a longer-term concern. But I think all things considered, they did pretty well, especially as the game went on, and especially in terms of pass protection later in the game. So I'll give them a B.
Yeah, I'm going to give them the first half, I would say a C. And in the second half, I would probably give them an A because they opened up some gaping holes. Krosky Merritt finished with over 100 yards rushing. Quali Conley had 90 yards rushing, albeit they both had long runs towards the end of the game.
You missed it, Eric, that ESPN calling him Quail the whole game.
Horrible. I mean, that's what happens when you get the lowest of the low, the last announced team there. That's Rod Gilmore should probably hang it up. Not a very good announcer. Nonetheless, 26 carries, 205 yards, 4 touchdowns. Average of 7.9 on the ground. Sounds good to me. I will give them a B+. All right, how about the defensive line, Shane? How would you grade them out?
I'm going to be extremely kind and give them a C for essentially being there. They could use the excuse as my first day. And not enough pressure on the quarterback, too many missed tackles. Again, we'll see how much of it is correctable and whether Dwayne Aquine decides to give other guys down the depth chart a shot if the struggles continue. But again, it was the biggest concern going into the season, and nothing that took place on Saturday alleviated that concern at all.
I'll give him an F. Stunk. I mean, absolutely stunk. I know they were rotating a bunch of players in and out. They were awful.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably too hard. You might be too. They stunk. They last year's team with Upshaw and Bill Norton and a few other Deuce Davis, light years better. I didn't see anything I liked in person. Great. Okay, so you want to find one positive. The rushing attack outside of Dampier for New Mexico had 23 carries for 81 yards. Still, not good enough. They stunk. And if they continue to play like that, Arizona might be a 6-win team. I
agree.
being
100%
real,
agree.
but yep. Secondary. Takario Davis got thrown out of the game. Shane late. Couple unsportsmanlike penalties. How do you grade out the secondary?
Yeah, you expect more from a guy like Davis. I'll give the group a C because I did expect more collectively as well. I'm not worried about the secondary long term, but too many pass completions allowed. I mean, New Mexico's receivers made some ridiculous catches as well, but too many completions allowed, some dumb penalties. Dalton Johnson is probably my favorite player on defense. He had 10 tackles. I know the D line didn't help much, didn't take a lot of pressure off secondary, but those guys have to be more disruptive going forward. And I think Dwayne Aquina will make sure they get there because that's his specialty. But I'm going to give him a C.
I'm going to give him a D. I mean, New Mexico guys who are less touted than Arizona play were making circus catches and whatnot. Got to break that stuff up. Now, you know what? I'll say a C minus because they did get a couple of turnovers, throughout the game, a couple of interceptions of Dampier. So we'll bump them up a little bit, but I came away really unimpressed. The passing yards should have been in garbage time, and they weren't. I mean, Arizona gave up, 24 points in the first half. It was completely uninspiring. The linebackers, you throw that in there collectively on defense, offense, or, the entire defense, linebackers, and secondary, C minus, D plus, was not good. I mean, you gave 39 points to New Mexico. Whatever happens the rest of the year, you're going to look at that and say, that was awful. And you're going to look at it and say, last year was so much better. And this team isn't even close. There's nothing that showed me on Saturday that this team is close to where they were last year on defense. Offensively, great. There's nothing that
I wish I could disagree with you. I wish I could be the counter cynic in this case, but I can't. And I think most Arizona fans will be with you. I think is it a foregone conclusion it's going to be like that the rest of the year? No. But the fact that this is the worst defensive performance we've seen in a single game since the end of the 2022 season, I think that is a big cause for concern. Yes.
They gave up 471 yards to New Mexico. I mean, they better not give up more than 471 yards to more than maybe one or two teams the rest of the year. I mean, that is flat out embarrassing.
Agree.
And I mean, they won because the offense was great. And it moves to number 3, Shane. Or, well, I guess we'll stick to coaching here. How would you grade the coaches?
I'll give him a B again for day one. I think the issue is more on the player side. Dina Babers has a pretty easy job. Let Noah Fafita and T-Mac do their thing. I'm a little surprised he went so pass heavy early when he's got a great group of running backs, and Montana State racked up 362 yards on the ground against New Mexico. But I think it was a game where the pass opened up the run instead of the other way around. And we saw that later in the game with Connolly and Krosky Merritt. On defense, obviously, as I said, Dwayne Aquina has a lot to clean up. Dumb penalties, missed tackles. Some of that is on him. I think most of it's on his players. We'll see how he does as far as in-game adjustments in a DC role, which is a role he has not had in almost 20 years. But again, try not to overreact to one game. So I'll give him a B. They won the game. They won by over 20 points. A lot of things to like, at least on offense, special teams as well. So I'll give him a B and just be kind for the day.
Okay, I'll give the offense an A. I'll give the defense an F, and it rounds out to a C. There you go.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I mean, I may be overly critical. Probably going to get crap in the comments from people.
No,
so be it. Now, I did get crap from a guy on YouTube. FF Dopester is his name, and he told me the other week when I said that T-Mac was a top 3 to 5 wide receiver in the country. He said, you're wrong. He's number 1, and wanted to make a point of that. And guess what, Shane? He was right. I was wrong. T-Mac's the best wide receiver in the country. But is he, buy or sell? This is the best offensive player that we've seen at Arizona in the last 3 decades.
The best player, I will buy that it's possible for him to be remembered that way. The way he carried the team, and someone posted this on X as well. It reminded me of kind of what Derek Williams did on the basketball side in
Yeah.
Sean Miller's second season, just
Mhm.
putting the team on his back. Tedero McMillan has 953 receiving yards in his last 5 games, going back to last season. That the Mexico podcast I was on, they were having trouble remembering how to pronounce his name. They're not going to have any trouble after Saturday. And another question we didn't answer on Saturday is, does Arizona have a bona fide wide receiver number 2 or 3? I'm not as concerned about that because that's not like Noah Fafita is obligated to distribute the ball more evenly when his buddy keeps getting open like that and as talented as he is. But yeah, if he keeps dominating games like this and the way he did toward the end of last season, he very well may be the best player in there, and at least at Arizona. Rob Gronkowski could be considered that if he had played more games. Kadeem Carey, the leading rusher all time. There are other guys. You want to go back to Art Lupino, you could certainly talk
Well,
about that.
Trump candidate. I hear that
Trump
here the
candidate
kid.
as well.
So
Yeah.
so to go Trump in the last 30 years, let's say you have Trump candidate, you have Rob Gronkowski, you have
Yeah.
I mean you get Bobby Wade. I mean Mike Thomas was a great receiver.
He was.
You have Foles played there. Jerron Kreiner was good. Kadeem Carey was great. Khalil Tate was great. Based on all of the above, the only one that I could put there, I guess maybe candidate, Carey,
Yeah.
Gronkowski, and T-Mac, and choose among those 4, but I think it's right up there.
Yeah, but I think of McMillan. I think if he can, I don't expect him to get 300 yards a game the rest of the way, but if he continues to play as well as he had just the last 5 games, like I mentioned overall, then I think he'd have to go down as probably the best. And the combination of the most talented and doing the most on the field, I think he's on his way to doing that if he keeps it up the rest of the year.
So apparently, yeah, there was something with his Heisman Trophy odds were about 150 to 1 during the game on Saturday night. They have now dropped to 60 to 1.
Yeah.
People are paying attention. Tedero
Yeah.
McMillan is all over the news, Shane. Would you say that this is the best offensive performance you can remember from an Arizona player in a single game?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I think it's very close between his performance and Kadeem Carey's 366 rushing yards against Colorado in 2012. If you want to lean toward T-Mac, I won't argue, especially when you consider that he reached 300 receiving yards with a third of the game to go. If New Mexico had continued to keep it close, and I'm thankful they didn't, but if they had, he could have broken the all-time record of 405 yards. Now, one of the reasons he was able to get that many is because the defense was so bad, and he stayed in the game longer than he probably needed to. But I think it was just as dominating. I mean, it's kind of hard to compare running back versus wide receiver, but everything he did on the field, I think it was up there. I would say that certainly the best by wide receiver ever, which is not a big statement. I guess I'd lean Carey just a little bit more because they were both against bad opponents. And I just think as a running back, you get hit a lot more and got to grind out more yards and get more touches to get there. But as far as just the athleticism that was displayed, T-Max was certainly right up there.
So Carey's big game, he had 366 yards rushing. I would say that was probably 1 and 1A with another Arizona-Colorado game that you mentioned. How about 2017, Shane? Khalil Tate, 12 of 13, 154 yards passing and a touchdown, 14 carries, 327 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That, to me, was probably the best Arizona offensive performance I've ever seen.
It's a fair
I would
point.
say that would be one. I'd say Kadeem and T-Mac right 1A, 1B, 1C, somewhere in that ballpark. I mean, it was fantastic. But, I mean, I think the Khalil Tate and Kadeem Carey were probably right there with that. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. And Tate, I think a lot of us have mixed feelings about Khalil Tate because of what might have been, and he just kind of falling off in his last year, which was maybe partly his fault, part Noel Mazzoni's fault. But yeah, he had some. I do remember that there's this one image of Khalil Tate going into the end zone, and one of the male Colorado cheerleaders on the sideline is just like with his mouth gaped open. It was just a perfect. So I remember as soon as you mentioned that, I remembered that, and that was a good point. I think you have to throw that one in there as well. But I think that one along with Tate and Team, take your pick. You can't go wrong with any of them.
No, but this was definitely right. I mean, this is one we won't forget. I also want to throw an underrated one. Noah Fafita against ASU last year. He and
Yeah.
T-Mac, I mean, what do you have, 500 and something yards
Yeah.
against ASU last year?
Made it look easy.
Yeah, 527, 5 touchdowns. T-Mac had two. So, I mean, think about that. The last two regular season games for Noah Fafita and T-Mac, Fafita has almost 1,000 yards. It's like 940 yards passing thereabouts and 9 touchdowns. And is not including the bowl game where he also had 354 and two. And then you have T-Mac, who, I mean, in that game against ASU, was absolutely unguardable. So he had 10 for 304 on Saturday. And against ASU, he had 11 for 266 and a
Almost
touchdown.
600 yards of total of receiving yards in those two games. Yeah.
And against Oklahoma, he had 10 for 160.
Yeah.
So
he's
doing
slacked off in that game a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's also facing better team. He basically has over 700 yards on 31 catches and 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games. And oh, by the way, he's also sitting on a 5-game streak of more than 100 yards receiving.
Yeah.
Dating back to Colorado, Utah, ASU, Oklahoma, and now New Mexico.
If he keeps up, I mean, again, he's not going to get 300 yards every game, but if he keeps up playing as well as he has and being as dominant as he has the rest of the season, the only thing that's going to keep him from going to becoming a Heisman finalist is the defense and just a lack of wins. That's going to be the only thing. If Arizona is able to win 8 or 9 games and he gets to 2,000 yards and 12, 15 touchdowns or whatever, then he's going to be a finalist.
I think he has to be. I think 2,000 yards is the magic number. Can he get there in 12 games? It's 167 yards a game, something like that. My math may be poor. But yeah, he's already got 300, so he's already, needs 1,700 yards in 11 games.
Usually not any math in the show. I'm trying to do it in my head, like 130, 140 yards a game the rest of the way, and that should about get him there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so if he goes and puts up a 200 spot, and I don't want him to play more than a half against NAU. I hope it's not necessary, but go ahead and put up 175 or 200. You're already a quarter of the way there.
He's on his way.
I mean, teams are going to, here's the thing. Teams are going to start double teaming him as they have to. And that's where Arizona's other receivers have to step up. I think that's really, 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 really important. All right. Number 4, Shane, before we get to bring on Jeff Dean, after watching that performance on Saturday, it is fair to revise Arizona's projected win total downward.
Before I get to that, I actually just did the math. 154.2 yards, receiving yards the rest of the way per game. He'll get to 2,000. So there you go.
In the Big 12?
Yeah, possible. It's possible. Yeah, related to your question, depending on where you had their win total before the season, yeah, I think it's fair, possibly. The team we saw on Saturday was not a college football playoff team. Now, the score definitely looked like a Big 12 score, like we talked about. So Arizona's already fitting right in there. But it's hard to believe that team with that defense is going to have a shot to go on the road and beat Utah or probably even Kansas State. And they're probably going to have trouble in their other road games as well, because they do have a couple other tough ones. So if you had this team at 9 or 10 wins, I had them at 8. But if you had them at 9 or 10, I might already be a little concerned, and maybe even at 8 as well, because again, Arizona didn't allow 39 points to anyone in regulation last year, and they played some pretty good teams in the Pac-12.
I'm concerned. Maybe next week I will calm down a little bit. Right now, yeah, I'm a little concerned. Arizona, if you were to ask me, put your money where your mouth is, they're a 7-win team. Based on what I saw the other night.
Yeah.
Now, my prediction before the year was 9-3. I'm going to buy it and buy that I'm revising it down for now. And we're going to do, it's kind of like a stock market. Some days you're up, some days you're down. What I saw was a 7-win team, if that, the other night.
Fair. I don't argue with it at all. Nope.
Just pointing that out. Don't forget that Wildcat Country is sponsored by Harrah's Auction Casino, which is the only Valley casino with Caesars Rewards, the player's card that pays for Vegas and more. In fact, the reward credits you earn with Caesars Rewards can be redeemed for hotel stays, dining, and more at 50 destinations across the country, including Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, New Orleans, and dozens of others. Sign up, play, and earn Caesars Rewards only at Harrah's Auction Casino. One card, 50 destinations to enjoy your perks. We are going to try to set a date and be out there for a post-game show for a road game, maybe November 2nd against UCF. We will work on that and keep you guys posted. And maybe at least a few of you come by, say hi, make some bets with us, and watch the game. So we'll let you know as we get closer if we can make that happen. Coming up next, it is our buddy Jeff Dean here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
All right, Shane, all right, let's try that again. Okay, I'm just having one of those days. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, Shane, we needed somebody who's going to bring out the best in us, who's going to tell it like it is and bring out the positivity from a 61-39 game on Saturday night. And there is no one better that we have ever had on this program to do that than the public address voice at Arizona Stadium and McHale Center. It is Jeff Dean, who is the founder of this podcast many years ago. Jeff, it has been a long time. Great to see you. Great to have you back on. And you sounded great on Saturday. Say something good about our defense on Saturday night.
Well, thank you, fellas. Glad to be here. I'm glad I can be your ray of sunshine. I'll try to be. I'll try to continue that today. So, something good about the defense. Honestly, I feel like they were getting some pressure with 3-man fronts, and I liked seeing that. It looked like the defensive line was able to get some pressure. They were able to put some swim moves. I know on a couple of the pressures. I don't remember who the players were exactly because it was kind of chaotic up in the booth this past game for reasons that don't have anything to do with what's going on the field. But I was able to notice several of the players individually winning on double teams and things like that, and that's always great to see, even if it is against a team like New Mexico to send a bunch of offensive linemen to the NFL. But if you're going to win double teams, at all, you got to win them at some point. So good to see. Obviously everybody else got to see what I saw on Saturday night, and that was some poor tackling, some poor decision making. There were a lot of situations where I saw captains that were kind of waving players into positions when they were not lined up properly. And these are things I think that happen in week one. They happen to a lot of teams in week one, regardless of how experienced the team is, how much the leadership, senior leadership they have. So, all in all, a lot of kind of things that I expected to see in week one with a brand new coaching staff and some new players.
Jeff, first of all, like you said, or like Eric said, it's been way too long. Appreciate you joining us. Glad to talk Arizona football again. To actually talk about a game is just to post a bunch of hypothetical scenarios. Your thoughts on the game day experience? There are a few new wrinkles this year. Obviously, you're not in the thick of the action, but you're kind of overseeing it. Thoughts on the fan support? It wasn't sold out, but a decent turnout for week one. Your overall thoughts on the game atmosphere?
Yeah, I thought the fans did great. The student section was amazing. There was 10,000 strong in the student section. They all wore white. They were engaged. They looked great. There was a lot of fan participation, as far as prompts and things like that were happening on the screen and on some of the new getting wrinkles and things like that they wanted to year under the new staff and things. So I felt like overall the experience was pretty good. Actually, I think everybody's first foray into Big 12 football was a bit of a lag. That game dragged on forever. There was a lot of things that I was trying to get used to as far as timing of the advertisements and the TV breaks and things like that, and the length TV breaks, and of course 2-minute warnings and all that stuff that was added in there. And I think you had a staff that was largely a officiating staff that was largely brand new to officiating a game together. There were a lot of discussions and things like that on the field. And so that kind of led to, I think, a little bit of a dragging type of a sense, I think, for the fans, unfortunately. But I felt all in all, the fans were great. And I like some of the things that were added to the, to the game day experience for them.
Well, speaking of things we like, Jeff, Teteroa McMillan, in the time that you've called Arizona football games, that you've been in the stands as a fan, where would you put that in terms of all-time Arizona single game performances?
Man, I mean, I was there for Kadeem Carey's record-setting day against Colorado. I think, the second to most recent day we've had in 20 years. I want to say it feels like um, that was a really impressive performance by Kadeem that day. I've seen some other pretty impressive performances as well, but T Mac, he makes it look easy in a sense, and I don't care who the competition is. I mean, Kadeem broke his record against a Colorado team who'd won one game in 21 tries. So I don't care who the competition is against. He made it look easy, and he made some people look pretty foolish out there. Just with his route running, the things that he did after he caught the ball, the way that he was able to go up and get the ball. You see things in his freshman year, and then you see things in his sophomore year, and he ends the season the way he did, of course, with the big coming out in Tempe and things like that. And then you see him in game one, and he looks like he's already in week 10 form, and he's just killing it out there. And I mean, that was incredibly impressive. I wish he would have scored on that other, on the other run after catch where he was basically downed at the 1 foot line in front of the end zone.
Yeah.
That would have been fun to give him that 5th touchdown. But man, what a game! And of course, offensive player of the week for the Big 12. That was an awesome introduction into the Big 12.
All right, Jeff. So let's take it a step further. At this point, is it fair to say that Tetairoa McMillan is the most talented offensive player that you have seen at Arizona in your time watching Arizona football ever?
Man, I've been watching for a long time, and I mentioned Kadeem Carey. I thought Kadeem was going to be a shoe-in for the NFL, just as how hard he ran and how his nose for the end zone, that he would find a way in. And for whatever reason, he didn't quite catch on in the NFL.
He is doing well in the CFL, so to get a little, I'm just saying he's still doing well there. So
he is. I mean, he's a tremendous athlete. I mean, you look at him and he still looks like he still looks like he's 22 years old, and he looks amazing. He's in incredible shape. And I got to watch Rob Gronkowski play, of course, the greatest tight end of all time. It's hard to deny what he did at Arizona. I wish we could have had a few more games with him. A lot of injuries and I think some precautionary things done by the family to keep him out of games from time to time, which is understandable. They saw the bigger picture. We've seen some pretty good quarterback play. We've seen some great offensive line play on that side of the ball. But when you look at a guy like Tetairoa McMillan, it's just different. You can just tell. You look at him and you say that's a top 10 NFL pick and maybe one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. And he may be taken with the number 1 overall pick, depending on what happens throughout the rest of the year. And of course, the combine, and you got to run and all that kind of stuff. And but his skill set, as a wide receiver is unmatched in the country right now.
Jeff, what did you think of the offensive line? I was concerned for a lot of the time watching them try to open up holes until later in the game. Just from your viewpoint up high there. I mean, outside of the first run that Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt had where there was a gaping hole, outside of that, I really wasn't impressed in the rest of the first half until the second half. Would you agree with that?
Well, as somebody who played offensive line, I can understand kind of what they're feeling and kind of what they're going through when you're watching a group of men try to play on the offensive line together. And I think what I saw was a lot of lack of chemistry, because Josh Baker had himself one hell of a football game. Josh at center was absolutely amazing. And I'm sure that if somebody goes back and watches the film on it, they would agree with me. I just noticed Josh dominating his position. And it seemed like the 2 guys to his left, the 2 guys to his right were sometimes a little bit, I don't want to say lost. It just seemed like maybe they weren't as tuned in to one another as they normally would be, as you would see an offensive line that's been together for 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 games, whatever. This is an offensive line that had to be shuffled pretty late in the spring with getting some new guys in there, not to mention the changes from the offseason and such. So what I saw was, I mean, there's definitely talent there. We know that guys like Wendell Moe can play. We know that Big Jonah can play. I think what we need now is we need to see chemistry. We need to see those guys get 60, 70, 80 reps a game together 3-4 weeks in a row before we really start to see what the offensive line looks like and what they're going to look like in weeks 10, 11, 12, and into the bowl game.
Jeff, I thought Dino Babers had a pretty easy job first week. Just let Noah keep throwing it to T-Mac. I was a little surprised, though, at how pass heavy they went early in the game, especially because you saw what Montana State did to New Mexico, rushing for over 350 yards. They ran the ball a bit later in the game and worked very well. Conley and Krosky Merritt both had around 100 yards rushing. Your thoughts on the game plan, and do you think Arizona maybe tried to limit the playbook a little bit, thinking that they're going to handle New Mexico pretty easily?
Yeah, I mean, you score 61 points on a team, should have been 62 if not for a bobbled snap. You can say you did your game plan pretty well. And when you line up Tetero and McMillan against any corner from a non-power 5 or non-power 4 school now, I guess, it's going to look like a mismatch. And I'm sure that Dino Babers and his staff were watching film and seeing things that were happening in the secondary and just salivating. I mean, how can you not want to throw the football to Tetero and McMillan when he is so higher, so much higher on the, on the food chain in regards to, playing in that position and stuff like that. And those guys were just completely overmatched. And they took advantage of a mismatch, which is what you're supposed to do. You do it in boxing, you do it in football, you do it everywhere. And what they wanted to do is get themselves into a situation where they weren't playing from behind. Unfortunately, the defense kind of let them down a little bit there for a while, and they were playing from behind. And I thought the offense did extremely well. I know that there was some concerns about getting the running game started, especially since Montana State ran for 300 and however many yards against New Mexico last year or last week. But every game's different and everybody game plans differently. And when you have a weapon like T-Mac, you need to exploit that. I mean, he almost had 5 touchdowns on Saturday night. It's hard to go against any game plan that features that.
Jeff, my last question for you, since we haven't had a chance to talk to you about the Big 12 overall, what do you think about this conference? I mean, I'm not shocking anyone when I think Utah and maybe Oklahoma State are the best teams, and certainly there are a few others in the mix, and hopefully Arizona, they get their defense together. How do you think this conference shakes up?
Well, I had some different feelings, I think, before week 1 had finished. I felt like I knew a lot about this conference and what the teams were, the kind of makeup of the teams and the strengths were and where the weaknesses were. And then Houston comes out and looks like one of the worst teams in college football this past weekend. And then a team that we all thought was going to be kind of a bottom of the barrel type of team in Arizona State just wallops Wyoming. I mean, Wyoming's a good program, a stand-up program, and it was 48-0 before Wyoming got on the board. So, in this day and age in college football, there's a ton of parity because of the transfer portal. It's often difficult to predict, I think, how an entire conference is going to play out. We all know who the best teams are in this conference. We know that Arizona is one of the best teams in this conference. What do we know about the middle 6? How do they play at home? Do these teams, play teams like Kansas? I mean, Kansas has a good football team. They don't have a home stadium this year. How is that going to affect Kansas and outcomes when people go to Kansas City to play against the Jayhawks? Kansas State has always shown that they're a good football team, especially at home. But then they go on the road. They stub their toes all the time on the road. They don't play well in bowl games often. It's kind of an interesting conference from top to bottom. I'm just real excited, to play some more teams. I want to play Kansas State coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think everybody wants to play Colorado because of everything that goes around about with their team and their players and their coach and the hype that they get. And I think everybody wants to take their chance of punching Colorado in the mouth. So that's going to be fun too. And as always, we get to look forward to those rivalry games, and I do believe Utah has become a rivalry game now. I think I feel like, as well as we have played Utah in the last 10 or 12 years or so, I feel like they have a chip on their shoulder about us, and deservedly so.
All right, Jeff, before we have you on for picks in the next segment, not a hard game to pick this week. Well, I know you're not going to make an official prediction, but I think we all know who's going to win between Arizona and Northern Arizona. All right, this is a 2-part question. First of all, before the season, how many wins, just kind of the range of wins that you thought Arizona could achieve this season? And does that number change after what you saw in week 1?
I felt this team was a good solid 9-win team, just like last year's team. I felt like a 9-3 record would have been very, very, very respectable for this team. And none of that has changed after Saturday night's game. And I know a lot of people are starting to say, oh, this team looks more like a 6-6 team than a 9-3 or 10-2 team. I get it. There's a lot of teams in week one college football that had it a lot worse than Arizona did. Florida State, I don't know what the score is right now when we're taping this, but they're getting walloped at home by Boston College after getting beat in the first week. Oregon is a team who was supposed to push for a national championship this year. They could barely get out of their own way against Idaho and came out with a 10-point victory when they were favored by over 44 points. So it's one of those things where you look at your own situation and you say, man, that really wasn't a very appealing, a very satisfying win. And then you look across the board and you're like, we could have been this team, this team, this team. We could have been 7 other teams who really didn't have a very good weekend, including LSU, a team that has national championship aspirations. And here we are, 5th year in a row again, 0-1 for LSU. And, they're starting to kick rocks over there. So I think there's a lot to be said about not just Arizona football, but when you compare Arizona football to where they are on the grand scheme of things, I think they're right where we all thought they were. They're a top 20 team that has a 9-win, I think an 8-win floor with a potential to win 11. I really do. And a great bowl game ahead that the fans are going to love.
You know what, Shane? I actually feel better after talking to Jeff. Always, I feel better after talking to Jeff. We'll see how much better we feel after we hear his picks in the next segment here on Wildcat Country.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
One bonus question, Shane, that I want to ask you and Jeff. Was at any point on Saturday night watching the game, I'll start with you, Jeff, were you concerned that Arizona might lose?
No. I was never concerned that we would lose the game. I just felt like with a weapon like T-Mac that we had, and then the ability to eventually run the football, that the defense was going to figure it out. Their quarterback had 390 yards of total offense of 417 team yards. He had 390 of them. They were going to figure it out eventually. I had no ideas that they might lose that game. Now, I don't want to give up 39 points to New Mexico, but the outcome is what it is, and sometimes you don't always get the score you want. But got to give credit to Bronco Mendenhall and his team. They might be a better team than we know. We're going to find out. They're going to Auburn this weekend, so we'll kind of see what happens there too.
All right, Shane, be honest. Were you nervous? Were you saying, "Oh, here we go," or were you fully in control? Arizona's going to win this?
Yes. No, I was nervous about. Absolutely. I was there for. When you see your team lose at home to not just an FCS school, but a bad FCS school in state, yeah, I'm a little snake bit, and you're down late in the second quarter. It's not the end of the game, but you're still okay. This team hasn't been able to stop them to this point. Yeah, that moment, I still thought they were going to win, but I began the process of trying to mentally prepare myself for the worst, if that makes sense.
So I thought about what we discussed on last week's show about margin of victory mattering, which is something that I said. And I never thought we were going to lose, but I said we could win this game by a touchdown, and that would be brutal. So that was kind of where my head was at. I kind of agree with Jeff. Like I was thinking, there's no way they're going to stop T-Mac. But there were a few times the offense went like 3 and out, and you're like, okay, this isn't great. They're only going to win by 7. I'm already getting text messages from people. This is getting annoying. ASU's up by a bunch. Okay, we're a little calmer. Good thing we didn't do a Wildcat Country live during the second quarter. All right, time for picks. In week 1. So remember, we did a new scoring system this year. 1 point for a spread pick, 1 point for an upset special cover, and another point if they win outright, and 2 points for Arizona's game. I had 5 by virtue of USC's win yesterday or on Sunday night. They were not an upset special, but I had 5 picks correct. Shane got 4 points, and Barrett Baker had 2. All right, Jeff.
I had
we'll
4. I
start with
half of my points. Sorry, I just gotta say half of my points came from Arizona winning because the rest of my picks were so bad.
because Arizona did not cover. Yes,
Did not cover specific. Yes,
Jeff, it's a low bar this week. Let's hope you can raise it.
Okay.
Upset special. Any team in the country that is an underdog. Who you got?
Man, any team that's an underdog in the country. I was kind of doing some research and things like that before. There's really not a whole lot of meaty picks out there. There's I think I'm gonna go with Sparty and their upset at Maryland.
Okay.
I believe
All right.
Maryland is favored by 7, I want to say.
Okay.
Something just tells me, these are those games that Maryland stubs their toe. They're supposed to win the game. You got a Big Ten school coming in, Michigan State. They're favored by a touchdown or more, and I think I'm just going to go with that one, just because I think Maryland has that tendency to just kind of fall apart in games like this, and Sparty could win that game 13-10 for all we know.
I was not impressed whatsoever with what I saw from Michigan State the other night. But that's an interesting pick. All right, Shane, what do you got as your upset special this week?
yeah, I whiffed on the one last week, but I'm going to go with Tulane, which is a 10-point home underdog against Kansas State. You remember from my preseason picks, I don't think as highly of K-State as a lot of people do. Tulane's coming off a 52-0 season opening win. Granted, it was over Southeast Louisiana, but they have certainly been one of the better non-power conference teams the last several years. So I'm going to take Tulane to cover and maybe even pull off the upset, which of course would make K-State a very angry team going into their matchup with Arizona.
Jeff, we're giving you 7.5 for Michigan State at Maryland.
Okay.
So you get the hook there. I'm going to take Syracuse +3 against Georgia Tech at home. Kyle McCord threw for over 400 yards in their season opening victory. And that Georgia Tech win over Florida State, based on what we've seen, at least thus far as we're recording the program during the Florida State-Boston College game, does not look as good because Florida State absolutely stinks. So I'll take Syracuse as a 3-point home dog. I think they win the game outright. All right. First game of the week might be the biggest game of the week. Actually, it is the biggest game of the week. And if Michigan loses, and they're a 7-point underdog against Texas, if they lose, and assuming Arizona takes care of business against NAU, the Wildcats, as I've been saying for months, Shane and Jeff, will have the longest active winning streak in the country at 9 games. So I actually think Michigan keeps this close. I think it's within a touchdown. I think this is a disrespectful line because of Michigan's defense. Jeff, we'll start with you. What do you think?
What's interesting about this matchup, you have two teams here. Michigan, all-time wins, most wins in NCAA football history. Texas, the 4th most wins in NCAA history. Almost 2,000 wins between these two teams, and this is the second time they've met. The last time was the 2005 Rose Bowl. Vince Young's coming out party, 5 touchdowns for Vince Young. They beat Texas 38-37. I expect a close score. I'm going to take Michigan +7 at home.
Okay, how about you, Shane?
I think we're all in agreement. And by the way, if Texas beats Michigan, then at least if nothing else, for a few hours, Arizona will have the nation's longest winning streak, and hopefully much longer than that. I'm just saying that we can, pop the champagne for a few hours, and I didn't even want to go there. All right, but I agree with all of you. I think it's going to be a close game. This isn't obviously not the Michigan team from last year, but they will be at home. I like Texas. I think it's going to be a grind kind of game. It's going to come down to the wire. I like Quinn Ewers was my preseason Heisman pick, so I got to stick with him. Give me the Longhorns to win by a field goal, but not cover. And
I just want to say, if that happens, savor it, because not many times in our lifetimes will Arizona have an active longest winning streak in football. I mean, and I don't know if it's ever happened before. Maybe in the 90s it did. If anybody knows that, leave us a comment. I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy it. I don't care if it's for 6 days or 6 out. Well, if they lose to NAU, we got problems. But I'm going to enjoy it up until Friday night. I'm going to tell you that. All right. Oklahoma State is an 8.5-point home favorite against Arkansas, who won 70-0 last week. Shane, can they cover the 8.5 at home?
I think so. I'm gonna take Oklahoma State to cover. Some of these are stubborn picks by myself, but I'm gonna take OK State to cover at home. I think they're going to be in the Big 12 championship game. I think home field advantage matters a lot in this one, so I think they win and they cover.
Jeff?
Stillwater is a great place to catch a football game. I had the opportunity to go there. It's a very daunting place for a visiting team to go because the student section sits right on top of them. They're extremely loud, and I think the Pistols will be firing in Stillwater. I like Oklahoma State minus 8.5.
All right. Now, let's talk about a game that I'm going to talk about on my Wednesday show on CBS Sports Network. Check that out, 11 a.m. I had to throw in a plug there at some point, Shane.
Absolutely.
It is a CBS game this week, and I believe the under has hit in Iowa State in 17 of the last 19 games, and it's somewhere in the mid 30s at this point. Iowa is a 3-point home favorite. Shane, start with you on this one. How are you feeling about this one?
Well, Iowa just might have an offense this year. We saw some glimpses in their first game. They're tough to beat at home. I like Iowa State more than most do. I think they're one of the sleeper picks to be in the Big 12 championship game. But I do think the Hawkeyes find a way to win at home by more than a field goal.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, the Cy-Hawk Trophy always a very contentious game. My cousin played at Iowa State, and we've talked about it on several occasions what that feels like. And even when Iowa State is the favorite team, even when they're the better team, it always seems like they just find ways to lose the Cy-Hawk game. I like Iowa at home -3.
Yeah, you're right. Iowa State doesn't win this very often. I mean, they won a few years ago, but they have lost 7 of the last 8. The one that they won in Iowa City was 10-7. Don't think it happens again. I'm taking Iowa. Ugly game. I don't think either team gets to 20, but we're all going to be in agreement there. All right, ranked teams matchup. In North Carolina, we got Tennessee -7.5 at NC State. Jeff, start with you. What do you think about that one?
Tennessee's kind of a hard team to figure out right now. So is NC State, for that matter. I thought NC State really underperformed in week 1. The Vols are very explosive. They've got the talent to be able to do it. Do they have the defense to be able to do it, especially on the road against a team like NC State? I'm gonna take Tennessee minus a 7.5, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just 8.
All right, Shane, how about you?
Yeah, it's a tough game. I agree with Jeff. I actually have Tennessee in the college football playoff. I know most people don't. I think this is going to be one of the better games of the weekend. I like Tennessee to win, but I think it's going to be a nail biter. Give me the Vols by a field goal.
All right, so you're taking NC State with the points. I like Tennessee to win this game by double digits. I was not impressed with what I saw from NC State the other night. Tennessee's offense going to be tough. If their defense is legit, then I think they can win this game by double digits. I may change that pick as I study more later in the week. Another pick. All right, I got to admit, the Deion Sanders hating. I mean, I was right about that last week, and that North Dakota State covered. Can they Colorado, Nebraska -7 against Colorado? We'll make these picks quick coming up before we get to Arizona. I'm going to take Colorado plus the points. I think they keep it within a touchdown. How about you, Shane?
Yeah, as much as me and everyone else would love to see Nebraska destroy the Colorado Primes, I think Colorado finds a way to make us miserable and not only cover but win. I don't think Nebraska will have an answer for Shedeur Sanders. I think it's a high-scoring game, something like 41-38, but I think Colorado comes out on top.
Oh, interesting. All right, Jeff, how about you?
Well, for the sake of being different, I'll take Nebraska minus the 7. I just want to be different. We're getting too many like picks here. So even though I really truly do think Colorado will keep it close, possibly even win that game, I'll just take Nebraska minus the 7 at home.
Boise State's running back rushed for 265 yards or something like that. Oregon only scored 24 points against Idaho. Now Oregon is favored by 19.5 against the Boise State team that gave up a bunch of points to Georgia Southern. I think Oregon wins this game by at least 3 touchdowns and they bounce back. How about you, Shane?
This is one of the more interesting lines of the week after both teams struggled at home to put away inferior opponents. I can't pick Oregon to cover against the team I picked to make the CFP after they beat Idaho at home by 10 points. I think the Ducks look better, but I think it's more in the range of a 10 to 14 point win.
All right, Jeff.
Oregon has never beaten Boise State. They're
Really?
0-3 until this Saturday. Oregon big. Oregon 41, Boise State 14.
I love giving score predictions. It makes me so proud. All right. NAU at Arizona, we have no line. Line should be somewhere in the mid-30s, maybe even higher than that. Jeff, you cannot give a pick on the game, a score prediction, but give us a couple keys that we should watch for.
I really don't know much about this NAU team. I think what we should do is we should just focus on more of the same. Hopefully, Noah Fafita is able to spread the ball around a little bit more, share with some of the other receivers, maybe get Kean Burnett involved a little bit more in the passing game, and some of the other receivers that didn't quite, get to eat too much with Tetero McMillan taking up all of the catches. But I'd like to see him spread it around a little bit, and of course, I'd like to see some of those mental mistakes be cleaned up, especially after the whistle's blown.
That is a great one because Shane and I talked about that earlier. It felt like T-Mac was the only one that was getting the ball. Outside of Burnett making a really good, it was a great throw by Noah in the first half. Outside of that, I can't really think of many decent plays down the field that anyone other than T-Mac didn't catch. All right, Shane, give me a score. Will you be cynical, and will this game be closer than we would expect?
So NAU beat Lincoln, California by 60 points in week 1. They rushed for 5 touchdowns. Arizona did pretty well against the run when it wasn't Dampier running against them on Saturday. With the exception, of him rushing for 100 yards. I think the defense looks a little better this week. Not enough for us to feel much better about the 2 games coming up after this one. I think T-Mac has another big week. I think Conley and Krosky Merritt pace the running game again. Arizona wins somewhere in the range of 45-21.
All right, here's the key for this one, guys. Wildcats need to get up and get their starters out fast. It's a short week. You're playing in Manhattan, Kansas on Friday. You cannot afford to keep your guys playing into the fourth quarter. I want to see Cole Tannenbaum or whoever the backup quarterback is in the third quarter. I want this game to be out of reach. I do not want Noah Fafita taking any hits in this football game. And I think we're going to see something like that. Arizona 47, Northern Arizona 17. I don't know if that will be a cover, but I think that Arizona will get their players out early. You can't, you have to rest some of these guys. T-Mac should not play for more than a half. Get a couple touchdowns, get 150 yards, and then get out. That's kind of the way I look at it. Jeff, always glad to have you on. You bring the positivity. You do a great job at Arizona Stadium. Any final words on just kind of reassuring the fan base to keep calm?
Yeah, look, the talent is there. The talent is there. We know that Coach Brennan has done more with less at San Jose State in a program that has really not given any support to the football team in the entire time that he was there. And I think just let the proof show itself in the pudding. This team's going to keep winning football games, and then we'll see what happens when we get to Manhattan, Kansas next Friday.
Dane, final words of wisdom.
People are tired of hearing my cynical rear end. So no, I hope we see more of the defense. I mean, look, if McMillan keeps getting open, you can't expect Fafita to keep throw to someone else just for the heck of it. I mean, we're not communists here. Let him go out and throw to whoever he wants. And T-Mac keeps getting open, that's fine. I would like to see a little more balance. I'd like to see fewer missed tackles, just clean it up. I feel a lot better if we learned that a lot of the things that we saw in week 1 that were bad were correctable rather than just a talent deficiency. So who knows how much we're going to learn against NAU, but hopefully we at least get on the right track.
Shane, I hate to say this, but as I was eating dinner on University Ave on Saturday night, there were some communists putting stickers around Arizona's campus. So maybe
what else is new? Nothing's changed.
They're all maybe they're all about spreading the I don't know what to tell you. Nonetheless, always glad to have you on, Jeff. For Jeff Dean and Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.